now. And all the links that we have in this presentation are going to be available in the Trailblazer community group later on, probably this week, probably not today, as well as all the great content that Stencil is going to share. So this is what our community group looks like. It's a really great interface where you can share ideas. This is just our local community group. There are community groups all over the place and larger community groups for marketing automation in general, really active collaborative communities. Also want to introduce everyone, if you have not already heard about Trailhead. Trailhead is Salesforce's free online learning management system. You can really level up your knowledge about a whole bunch of different topics and subjects. There are 40 or 50 different modules and badges you can earn specific to Pardot marketing engagement specifically, but you can learn about all the different other aspects of Marketing Cloud, a ton about Salesforce, or a whole lot of other things you might be interested in. There's a really great course on like drug school management, sustainability, design concepts. It's really a great resource for pretty much anything that you might be looking to level up in your career. So we're not the only game in town. Here in New York, we have 6 or 7 different Trailblazer community groups. There's the Salesforce admin group, which is rather huge. They have about 3,000-4,000 users. The developer user group, nonprofit user group, and women in tech. You can find all of these at trailblazercommunitygroups.com. And there are events all around the city, in northern New Jersey, up in Connecticut, in Westchester, out in Long Island. Really great content, really great speakers, way more than just marketing automation. Some of the upcoming user groups in the next couple of weeks. Next week, the Salesforce Architect group, a relatively newer group, is going to be sharing some of the insights that they have learned. This is going to be Sandy and Mike, who I believe are out at TDX this week. They're going to be bringing back a whole bunch of developer-focused learnings from the big TDX conference this week. And then there's going to be a March happy hour. I believe this is going to happen. I have the date wrong, but the link, it's here in the spreadsheet. And then the Hamilton, New Jersey user group is going to be doing a session on flows and Flow Builder. Flow Builder is a really incredible tool. It's replacing Process Builder. If you've only used Pardot before, it's kind of like Engagement Studio on steroids. You can automate just about anything in Salesforce. It's an amazing tool to automate sales, marketing, pretty much any type of business process. And it is almost all declarative. So if you're not a developer, this is the perfect tool to learn. Coming up in a couple months is going to be the Salesforce World Tour at Javits Center. We don't have Dreamforce. San Francisco is the only city that has the official Dreamforce, the biggest tech conference in the world. But we have the next best thing, and that is a world tour. It's free to join. You can register at this link, and it's a great place to learn about different vendors, find network, learn about the latest and greatest new tools. And our community will be there, probably doing events or happy hour, definitely the night before, and that's going to be on May 8th of this year. There are also some local learnings that you can find out about at the Customer Success Community Center. This can be located at this particular link here, and the Ask a Pardot Expert sessions are really awesome way to troubleshoot issues. So you don't have to route everything through a support ticket. You'll get hands-on support, and it's a really awesome experience.
At 5 a.m. too.
At 5 a.m. Yeah. At many different times. There are Maya sessions, there are back sessions as well. But if you're so inclined, you're welcome to join at 5 a.m. There are still a lot of resources for Marketing Cloud account engagement at pardot.hubs.vidyard.com, especially for newer Pardot customers, configuration, best practices around scoring, about BMA. There's a ton of legacy content that was not killed off when the website was killed off that's still available in video tutorials, and there are something like 100 different videos here that you can learn from.
Hey guys, how are you?
One Trailblazer community that I want to highlight everyone's attention to is the B2B marketing automation community. It's now called the MC Account Engagement, FKA, which I had to Google because I thought that was a typo, but formerly known as Pardot. And this is a community of some tens of thousands of Pardot users, Marketing Cloud account engagement users, that ask questions, on the larger Salesforce Trailblazer community, and you can crowdsource any issue, any challenge you might have, or if you're just trying to learn something, it's a really great community. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the newest release highlights that are part of the Spring 23 release. There is a webinar that actually just happened today, and I learned a couple things. I don't actually have a link to it because it's not going to, the public link is not going to be available till I think tomorrow, but I will post that up in the Trailblazer community, and I'll include that in the recording of this presentation that we're going to disseminate after tonight. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of the coolest new features coming to Marketing Cloud account engagement in Pardot now with the Spring 23 release. And I'm going to run through this quickly. We can focus on this a little more depth later, but I want to save time for our main event, Stencil. So Salesforce has been rolling out a ton of actually really functional features in addition to nomenclature changes. There have been a whole ton of releases in 2022 with the Pardot Slack integration, really cool ways to call out visitor activity or lead conversion in your org's Slack application. A whole bunch of landing page and email builder enhancements, and the V5 API just continues to add additional functionality. One of the coolest new tools released last year was conditional completion actions, the ability to take divergent action depending on what people filled out in a form or depending on what you have in the database. And a bunch of improvements this year with Pardot external actions. We're going to be talking a little bit.
Oh, you skipped over my favorite. I got to stop you right now. Anybody use that email bounce report? Anybody?
I know.
Thinks it sucks? What?
Okay, you're being facetious.
Oh, no, I'm telling you, I use that bounce report. It like teases you. It doesn't take you where you need to go. I mean, it's wonderful to have, but damn, just one more leg would make it monumentally useful.
Well, overall, I think early last year, the mailability improvements were, massive, and the ability to actually sync those fields over, like the opt-out
Right, that was big.
to
No
Pardot.
doubt about it. But now
to
knowing who
to
bounces when
Salesforce.
is great, but it doesn't take you anywhere. It doesn't really give you the necessary
Yeah, it's
information.
not a deeper,
Show you a little deeper
level.
that you get in Pardot when you bring up the prospect.
Yeah, the ability to filter on bounce codes or something like that would be pretty awesome, but
You can immediately see what's happening at an account level, right? Because you see all these things happening at an account, you need to be whitelisted individuals, it might be the desktop. All right, that's therapy over, thank you.
well, Mike, this is a great
Therapy over, it was, I
great-
jumped the shark, I'm sorry.
Great opportunity to
I jumped the
use
shark.
Salesforce's idea exchange. I suggest that. I'm sure you could crowdsource some product development.
Now get into that 10,000 user group.
Yeah.
Shaking them.
So we're going to be talking about Pardot external actions and because there's some more enhancements that are on the product roadmap and are definitely part of this Spring 23 release. The ability to sync the entire database. Remember, and I don't know if maybe you don't know, but previously to do an entire database sync, you needed to actually change a field value on your entire database, which showed up in your activity history in perpetuity. So if you wanted to do a full sync and not have Pardot support do it, you'd have to like edit the email address and like append a 1 or something to make it a bad email address, upload that faulty, that bad data to your system, change it back, and then reset as like a really, really bad, administrator best practices database management. So we now have the ability to sync our entire database. And then, like I said, a whole bunch of really awesome improvements for the V5 API. A lot of stuff we can do with bulk action. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those things coming up, in the next couple of slides. For new Pardot customers, or Marketing Cloud account engagement customers, I can't even say it fully, but email sending domains are now going to require an additional verification. So if you wanted to set up email sending prior to the Spring 23 release, you would actually have to only set up DKIM and SPF records, and that would automatically verify your sending domain. There's an additional domain authentication. You're now gonna have to prove that you own your domain, which is sort of a realm of authority in virtual real estate. This is not going to affect existing Pardot customers, but if you onboard a new Pardot.org, you will have to go through this additional verification. I'm sure you've all seen the error message in your account that real-time automations are actually going to be retired. So Pardot is like a series of different cron jobs. So there are multiple different syncs happening at all times with different records with Salesforce, within the entire system with dynamic lists, continually evaluating criteria that are in the Pardot database, and evaluating it and either taking action or syncing as needed. You used to be able to bump up automation rules to the top of your queue.
Only if you wanted to destroy performance, that was the
If
big
you wanted to really slow down your entire org. And now with a really exciting new tool called the Optimizer, it's really going to be rendered irrelevant. And it's really not great for system performance. And Mike called that out quite rightly, and it's going to be deprecated in the summer. So if you have any real-time automations, they will cease to work. Lastly, the WebEx connector is going to be retired. There's no longer going to be native Pardot support for WebEx, and the Slack app beta. Now that Slack has a native integration, that can just be integrated automatically through your connector settings. But if you are opted into the beta is no longer going to work. Just make sure you connect your Slack app in your connectors. You will need to have a paid Slack account to have that happen. All right, so I'm going to talk about two quick little major initiatives that are really top priorities for marketers, and that's really increasing efficiency for the marketing tools we already have. And then the second theme is really going to be integrating those different technologies to work together. And I think that's going to be a really great segue into a really great integration tool, Stencil. So if you've logged into Pardot the last couple of days, you might have seen that there is this banner at the top of your screen that is offering a beta test of this new Optimizer tool. And this is what it does. It will look through your system and recommend changes or actions based on the integrity of your database, the latency or recency that you may have automations running, and recommend improvements for you to actually speed up your system performance. And there are a couple different examples here. You may see that your system is set up to perform quite well, which is this first example up here. You may just see, 1 or 2 improvements that you could make, like this one example that, Engagement Studio programs are still running, but they haven't had any processing anytime recently. You can improve system performance by just pausing those campaigns. Or you might see that your system is really bogged down, Pardot is really, really slow, and you're overexposing, your database. You have way too many syncing issues and syncing errors. You have multiple automations running, API limit issues, and that's really slowly bogging down your system, and your org might be really slow as a result. This is becoming a bigger and bigger issue as enterprise companies start to leverage Pardot more and more. So this auditing tool has been launched, and it's in a beta right now. You can opt in. If you are an administrator in your org, I think you will need to be an administrator org because this is a system configuration setting, but it is available to all tiers of Pardot. So check it out. It's a way to speed up an easy win in your Pardot org. The other really big improvement is for efficiency within your existing org is the bulk action API. And you can do things like mass updates of like archiving a whole ton of prospects via the API in a way that you couldn't really do before. You had to make a whole bunch of different queries. Bulk actions API is again a great way to improve the performance and functionality of your Pardot org. The second theme here is really this disjointed series of sort of Martech tools that we have, and Pardot is this really incredible marketing automation tool that can do so much, but quite often it's limited just to email sending, and you have to switch to different platforms. You have to have different KPIs and different tools. There's overlapping functionality maybe in different email platforms you use for different functions, different, maybe you have, webinars or something in another platform. And a lot of the systems don't really talk to one another. And it creates a lot of drag, in marketing ops and in reporting and really a whole lot of sort of technical debt in a lot of companies. And we all kind of know this intuitively, but when systems speak to one another, and apples are compared to apples within systems, marketing operations function so much more effectively, and actual marketing goals are really achieved. And there's a bunch of improvements again to Pardot account engagement that are allowing that to happen. And they're really falling into two different buckets: external actions and external activity. And I'll talk a little bit about what each of those are. They're really external actions are able to be brought into Engagement Studio now. So things like a Zoom webinar or an in-person event sign up. Typically, you'd have to have a native connector installed to do that, and the native connector selection is really, really limited. We can now use external actions to bring in external marketing activity into the Pardot system. There are also a whole bunch of marketing app extensions. We can start to use external activity. You can start to use Flow Builder to bring in maybe Salesforce events, maybe things in other platforms into Pardot. And Salesforce did an internal labs competition where they're actually using Flow Builder to create records. And Pardot is very limited for anyone that's really in depth in Pardot. That Pardot can create leads, and with Pardot support, you can actually create contacts, but Pardot has no ability to create account records, opportunities, custom objects, anything like that. With external activity, and I believe these labs that they created are actually in the App Exchange using external actions and Salesforce Flow, the Flow Builder. You can do things like create opportunities or update opportunities based on things that are happening in Pardot, and it's adding incredible extensibility to the marketing automation platform.
Wouldn't it be easier to just sign up for B2B MA and do Analytics Studio to wed Salesforce and Pardot together? Seems like
sure.
they're flipping the coin here.
B2B MA is a great BI tool for decent BI tool for Pardot data, but it's not going to give the ability to actually control Salesforce data in an automated fashion. So if you want to start, if you want to kick off a sequence of sales processes or
no,
create records or
not actually,
update opportunities based on marketing activity or based on a sequence of things that happen in an engagement studio journey, that's all possible now using Flow Builder. And the sky's really the limit. You can bring in external actions into Pardot, and then using Salesforce Flow, you can, do incredible things in Salesforce as a result. All right.
Are there any new, are the flows available out of the box on the Exchange, or do you have to kind of build those out?
There are a couple sample flows that are available. So Salesforce did this internal sort of like competition, and they're going to be available on the App Exchange from Salesforce Labs. That's sort of their internal, sort of beta testing. Like Google's had Labs beta tests for years and years and years. I don't even know if Gmail's actually out of beta yet, but yeah, there's a couple of automations specific to marketing on the App Exchange right now, and they're trying to grow that vendor network of integrated partners. Stencil being one of the tools that really integrate, that are just sort of plug and play and that seamlessly integrate your Martech stack together with Salesforce and marketing automation. Yeah, this is just another example of external actions here. Lastly, I just want to highlight everybody's attention to the name change. Pardot is now officially Marketing Cloud Account Engagement. You probably logged into your application and saw a truncated version of the Pardot Lightning application, now called Marketing Cloud Account Engagement. Just be aware of that change. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to our presenters tonight. I want to introduce and thank Noah and Jeff from Stencil for coming out tonight. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn over the presentation to them.
So I will share my screen. Which mic are we using? The mic in the room?
Yeah, can everybody hear Noah over here? Another thumbs up.
Perfect.
All right, thanks.
Perfect.
Thanks,
There you
Andrew.
go.
Thanks, Noah.
Perfect, love it.
Still gonna speak up.
There you go. I will. There we go. That's me.
The button down, I think it's like dead center.
So I'm Noah, founder CEO of Stencil. Jeff Smith is our SVP of Marketing. We're super happy to be here today. Thank you to both of you for having us. Really excited to get out and see people and say hi in person. And hopefully, if you've never heard of Stencil, by the end of this, you'll at the very least know what we do. And we brought a few of our favorite Stencil slots here, and you'll see how those make sense in a second. I do want to give a shout out to something Ty said a second ago, which is the Idea Exchange actually works. I submitted this back in 2021, and this got delivered. It's part of what became the API. And so I'm 1 for 1, batting 1,000, but it's real, it works, like people pay attention. I didn't have any inside track, but there we go.
That's awesome.
With 6 volts.
Yeah.
It's take it where you can get it, I guess. All right, let me get to my screen. Sweet. So today we're going to chat about creating amazing emails without all the back and forth. And I'm pretty sure you're all experiencing that on a daily basis. And so something you probably all agree with and already know is that creating an email just takes way, way too long. It takes forever. And by long, I usually mean like weeks to get one email out the door. And so good question is, why is that the case, right? It's 2023, there's lots of technology, like that's kind of wild to think about. Why is it the case? Well, if I was to ask all of you, and especially in a Pardot meetup, how do you send your marketing emails? You'll tell me your deployment platform, which in this case is Pardot or Marketing Cloud Account Engagement. And if I was to then ask you how you create those emails, most likely I'm going to hear about a process that lives completely outside of Pardot. And that's a process that involves a bunch of really talented people going back and forth. Those people go back and forth in their inbox, they go back and forth over Slack or Microsoft Teams. Maybe they use a project management tool, some people are in a design tool. And generally it sort of looks like this. And this is a really nice cleaned up version of the process. These people don't have big enough angry faces. We got to change that, Jeff. It's a total mess, right? It's super time consuming. And these are really talented, valuable people. And it's all this back and forth, right? And so what's happening here is there's a bunch of single purpose tools that don't, to what Ty was saying earlier, don't talk to each other. They don't integrate with each other. There's no real collaboration, and with the amount of changes, edits, especially last minute, 11th hour kind of things, it drives everybody crazy. People's tension, anxiety goes through the roof. SLAs, if you have them in your organization, aren't met. And ultimately, right, like why are we doing the email campaign in the first place, right? The objectives for that oftentimes suffer because people are just trying to get the email out the door, right? The focus changes to just like, let's ship the thing rather than let's actually hit the goal and drive the business outcome that we're trying to. And so we took a second to take a deeper look at where that back and forth occurs. Hopefully this doesn't cause too much PTSD for everybody. And so generally it starts with the marketer, right? There's a business reason why the email should exist in the first place, to launch a product, to make people aware, to announce something, an event or whatever that might be, right? And they create a brief, right? What is this campaign? What is the strategy? Who's it going to? Sometimes there's copy, a whole bunch of things. What audience, all that kind of stuff. And then that brief usually gets attached or sent over to like a project management tool. Maybe it's attachment in an email to someone who helps put it together. Maybe that's a copywriter, maybe that first marketer is writing the brief. And it goes over the fence to someone who usually helps design it or create it. Every company is a little bit different in how this works, and sometimes it depends on the size of the company. But someone who's generally helping with working in an Adobe tool like Figma or Adobe Creative Suite to lay it out and design it. Maybe they're using pre-made pieces, maybe not. And then that goes back to the marketer to see. And the marketer, they start their comments with, oh, well, now that I see it, and then they list 20 things that they want to change, right? They send it back to the creative team. The creative team is not sitting there just waiting for those comments. They're already working on something else. And so it goes to the bottom of the stack, comes back up, right? Has some more questions. And then finally, they have a version that they show to other people in marketing or other stakeholders, right? Because it's never just one person. And then those people see it and they go, oh, now that I have some comments and things like that. And so finally, right, it gets coded or using the template tool, whether that's the Pardot Builder or Dreamweaver or something like that, loaded into the marketing automation platform. Of course, you need to then send proofs out to make sure your personalization tokens work the right way and all that fancy stuff. Hopefully you're lucky and nothing happened, but most likely there's some things that got screwed up that need to be changed. If you're like most people we talk to, and then it goes up the chain for approval, and maybe those approvals are happening along the way, but it's executive approval, it could be legal compliance approval, brand approval. Sometimes there's many other groups that need to see it. We all hope that they don't have too many last minute changes, but I think we all also know the reality of what that looks like. And then finally, right, it's ready to go, actually set up and deployed. All of that to send one email. That's wild, right? And so what happens when you actually are doing a lot of emails per week, per month, per quarter, right? That process starts to get pretty crazy, and the amount of time that consumes from everybody involved. And remember, these are really talented folks who are doing this, right? Who have really ambitious business goals to hit. So if we were to play a little game, audience interaction here, feel free to write in the chat, why is there so much back and forth?
The email just needs to pop.
The email just needs to pop.
Make it pop.
Okay, what else? Typos. Okay. What else? Why is there so much back and forth in the process we talked about earlier with companies?
Not a clear vision originally.
Okay, not a clear vision, and then other people come in and say it should be something like this or something like that. Is that right, Andrew?
Correct.
Disconnect between technical coding capabilities and, you know, and the
That's usually
vision,
the
vision itself,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Get done.
So that's a great one. We'll start with that one, right? The person who decides what the content should be is often not the producer of the email, right? So they're putting together the brief for the copy doc, and then they have to send it to someone else to make it. Whether that's a designer, a developer, some ops, right? Someone campaign ops, internal or agency,
Who knows HTML?
right? It's all that back and forth, right? So you're automatically just creating back and forth because there's now two groups of people or two people who need to go back and forth, right? Another one you heard me talk about, when that first requester gets back the first version of the email, their comments start with, oh, now that I see it. And if we think about what that actually means, it means they couldn't visualize what the email actually would look like when they were creating that copy doc or that brief, usually in Microsoft Word or Google Docs or something like that. Maybe there's an intake form, right? And so now that I see it, like that copy is way too long for the amount of space, or that doesn't fit, or that image looks silly next to the other thing or whatever that is, right? And so again, right, if you're the person deciding the content but you can't visualize it, you're almost inviting another round or two or many of changes because you can't visualize it. Another one, depending on the amount of folks that are involved in your org, and we've heard some wild numbers of how big this gets up to, is nobody can see anybody else's comments, right? If you send proofs to people, right, each person gets their own proof. And so if someone just hits reply to you, nobody else can see those comments. So what happens if those comments conflict with each other? What happens if a senior person comes in later and overrules the junior person and the change has already been made? Like, you start getting in this whole mess of back and forth and changes, right? It's like, I usually equate it to like if you're working, sorry if anybody here's a lawyer, working with a lawyer on red lines in a Word doc. If you compare that and nobody can see anything, you compare that to like a Google Doc where everybody can see people's comments and, write threads, like all that kind of stuff, except you're working with like 20 lawyers at once, right?
And it's an email thread typically buried in all the commentary is multiple email threads,
Exactly, and maybe you're replying to the third version and Jeff's replying to the first version, right? It's 2023, and like this is still the way the vast majority of people make emails. Like this is wild to us. And then the last thing, I'm not sure how much folks got into it. The whole process is waterfall, right? It shoots and ladders, but in reverse, or I guess that's the shoot, not the ladder. But if you get to the end and some senior person goes like, Michael, to your question, like, what's the strategy? Why are we focusing on this but something else? Back to the beginning, right? You throw all that out and you go all the way back and you do this whole thing again, right? And that's why this literally takes weeks, sometimes months in companies to actually do that. And when you actually look at what companies are spending their time on, right, and how long it takes, right? When we've worked with companies and spoken with companies about pretty much every vertical and size, 80% of companies, it takes them 2 weeks or more just to create one email, right? Like that's wild, and especially when everybody wants to do more, and emails the workhorse of so many marketing programs, and especially with COVID and digital channels rising, that puts even more pressure on this process that's really, really painful. Those teams, when we talk with them, they spend 90% of their time on production-related activities, copying and pasting, making the edits, swapping out the image, changing the link, fixing the tracking parameters, whatever that is, right? A bunch of stuff that I was talking about earlier, right? And so if that's 90% of the time, that means only 10% is actually spent on the stuff that's focused on hitting the goals of the program, right? Like why does the email and that campaign exist in the first place, right? And that's backwards. It should be at least the opposite. And so I think we all know, right? Email, is the workhorse of many, many marketing programs. And whether you're in B2C, which I think there's less folks here or nobody, or B2B, right? Or even internal comms, right? Email's ability to find customers, move them to action, keep them taking high value actions is second to none, right? It stood the test of time, like literally decades, right? When programs aren't working, what's the thing out of the senior person? Can we send some more emails, right? Like how do we do more? It is the last channel anybody will ever stop doing in tough economic times because it works, and it works really, really well. We all know the ROI is ridiculous. It's through the roof. And so if you and your team want to optimize the collective intelligence there and skills when it comes to email marketing in the channel and achieve incredible results and continue to get better, it can't happen if you're stuck in a process that's holding you and the organization back. And so I'm here to tell you there's another way. And you don't have to stay stuck, and you can get away from that process that's too costly in terms of time and oftentimes in terms of hard dollars, right? Especially if you're working with external folks to do that. And this other way gives you and the team lots of time back to actually focus on performance and goals and strategy of the things that you're trying to make happen for you, the team, and ultimately the company, right? Like, why does the marketing work exist in the first place? It's to drive the goals of the company. And so in that better way, you're going to see better program engagement, whatever that means, whether that's opens, whether that's clicks, whether that's conversions, leads, higher value actions, right? And ultimately for businesses, right, it's revenue, right? Whether that revenue is 6 hops away or 1 hop away, like that's really what these programs are meant to drive. Some of them are more direct than others. And so how do you go from that time-sucking process to one that's creating amazing emails where you can focus on actions that drive the results that your boss and the senior leaders want to see. And so to get there, you need to start by improving creation efficiency, right? We've created a model for this, and it starts by creation efficiency because that mess of a process that consumes the time, if you can free up that time with efficiency, it gives you and the team back time to focus on strategic operations, both the mental bandwidth to actually think about it and the actual time to go do those things. Because the strategic operations are how you and the team are going to focus or unlock the optimized performance, how you're going to break through the results that you and the team have already been doing, how you're going to champion challenge, how you're going to do that higher level stuff, the testing, multivariate testing, the A/B testing, dynamic content, more languages, more versions, more whatever that is, right? That you probably know you want to do. It's just you don't have the time to get to it today, right? So it needs to start with creation efficiency. And so for that to work, there needs to be 2 components that have to be true. One is creation by everyone. And so not just designers and developers. And the way you do that is low code or low code. Modules and templates, right? You need to make these emails reusable. That doesn't mean they have to look the exact same, but you need to productize and componentize, whether that's modules or templates, pieces of the email to make it much faster of a process and enable folks who are not technical to be able to do this themselves without coding skills. And then you need the branding compliance guardrails. And so I'm not sure all of the organizations that you all work with, but they've made an investment in Pardot, right? And they've made an investment in you. And so presumably this is an organization that takes themselves really seriously and is using a professional level platform for this. And so the brand guardrails, right? Making sure the logo is the right version of the logo or it's not switched, making sure the fonts, the colors, the layout, right? You're not sending something that's broken, right? And taking all these things and translating them into something that's, usually a PDF of like, oh, here's our brand rules, here's the color palettes, into something that's living and can be automatically enforced. And so that frees up your designers from being logo police when dealing with marketers and turns those conversations with your design colleagues into ones about how do you make the email better? Is there a better layout that makes sense? How do you actually drive the performance, right? And so there's no reason any organization should be using a very talented, expensive human to make sure the hex code is exactly the right color for the brand palette every single time. Like, that's ridiculous. And then lastly, right, it needs to be integrated. So Ty was talking about this earlier, right? It's 2023, right? Any piece of Martech in your stack needs to work with, it has to work with the other stuff that you work with. Nothing can exist on an island. And so the deployment platform, in this case Pardot, table stakes. But there's a lot of other tech in your stack that should all be talking to each other and working together. And if it's not, you're just, creating opportunities for inefficiency and honestly execution risk. And that provides a lot of value for time savings for you and the team. The other big thing that needs to be true, right, in what the better way looks like is collaboration for the stakeholders, right? This is already a collaborative process. There's a lot of people involved. Some of them are directly involved at the core, right, probably a lot of you, and some of them are secondary or tertiary stakeholders, the person who sees it at the very end to sign off and say, okay, or legal or compliance, or whatever that is. And they all need to give feedback or comments. Maybe that's a thumbs up, maybe it's an actual written comment, But that needs to be in one place, right? We talked about it can't be 20 different email threads. It can't be someone writing in Slack over here and someone else putting something in Workfront or Write or Asana or Jira or whatever over there, right? It either needs to be natively in wherever this place is, or in an integration with wherever you're creating emails. Again, they have to talk to each other. They have to work together. And you need permissions, right? Folks work in all different size companies, but even a company or an organization that's 100 or a few hundred people up to hundreds of thousands, there's different roles and different people, and people should be able to do what they should, but not what they shouldn't, right? And it's very easy in 2023 to have technology that can enforce those things rather than having a crazy, wild roundabout process to do that. And so a marketer should never be able to create an email that would cause worry to someone else that it's going to go out of bounds. And so that's what happens when you put an email creation platform at the center of your email creation process, right? And all of that stuff can be realized. It integrates, as we talked about a second ago, with all of the tech that's already in your stack, right? And so you can see Pardot or Marketing Cloud on the right, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you're probably using and leveraging that should talk to each other, right? And work really well together, right? Your image jams, your workflow project management, your dynamic content, links, tracking analytics, right? Even Slack, right? Why Slack? Well, if I send Jeff a proof and he Slacks me back a comment, Slack's in the problem space. Like that's where people are giving feedback. So that has to be part of the solution, right? And these deep, robust integrations, thanks Eva, are what let you save huge amounts of time across this whole thing for your team while reducing the execution risk. And so Stencil allows you and the team to do that, create efficiency, be strategic, optimize your actual channel performance and business performance. And this isn't just me talking, it's quite real. And so we work with many companies across all different sizes, from mid-market up through Fortune 10, for-profit, not-for-profit, pretty much every vertical, B2B, B2C, and these are the, I'm going to share just a couple examples of some of the results they're seeing, from focusing on creation efficiency to then free up the time for thinking and operating strategically to drive those results. A iconic computer printer maker, I'm sure you can figure out which one, it only has 2 letters. It used to take them 2 weeks to make an email, right? Just like we talked about. And with Stencil, that was able to come down to 1 day. They had outside resources that were manually doing this, and so they didn't need those folks anymore. And that was a real cost savings, direct cost savings for them. And non-technical folks were able to create perfect on-brand emails. And so they went from 12 emails a month to 150 emails a month, right? More than 10x. No additional headcount, reduced external hard costs, right? And shrunk that amount of time, right? Like those are the kind of results that when you focus on the creation efficiency, you can unlock. Fortune 5 healthcare services company, right, was spending their time updating HTML and templates. They had a ton of templates. They had a whole bunch of requesters across the org. It left that team no time for actually focusing on optimizing or testing messaging results or strategy. With us, they cut that creation time in half, and a huge 70% reduction in the touch points around this, right? All that back and forth disappeared, and 100% of those emails became on-brand and responsive, or it wasn't that case before. And now the team has a whole lot more time to actually focus on driving those results. Major real estate firm that owns a building not too far from us, just out the window, had a really time-consuming process. They have residential, commercial real estate investments, and so we reduced that time by 95% and saved over 250 hours a month for that team, right? Imagine going to your marketing leaders and saying, hey, I have a path to save hundreds and oftentimes it's thousands of hours a month that we can reallocate towards higher value things. Is that something we'd be interested in? Like nobody's gonna say no to that.
It's 2 dedicated marketing ops people, basically.
So when you put in ChatGPT,
Just you wait, maybe a few hours ago. Large global B2B payments company, name we all know, right? 3 to 4 weeks to get an email out the door. Honestly, that's pretty quick for financial services. And they didn't have anybody who had the HTML expertise on staff, right? Turnover and whatnot. And so with us, they were able to give non-technical people the ability to do that. And that freed up the time, right, by reducing that time by almost 98%, that they were able to change things in the email, the content, the layout, things like that, and drive a 2.5x increase in click-through rate, right? Like, so like real, tangible, higher performing emails from there.
I'm surprised this is your largest market segment.
Which one?
Non-technical users being able to compose an email
Optimize.
quickly with complex images, obtain words, pictures, and numbers.
Right.
Without having to wrangle through the Pardot editor,
Yep.
figure one, and rapidly advance. So I don't know if we didn't get there, sorry if I jumped the shark, but the idea that you could just do words, pictures, and numbers in your email to you.
Definitely.
I'm surprised it isn't the game changer right there.
That is the value. There you go. Right? It's called Stencil because you can't screw up a stencil. And so,
okay, click.
what was I gonna say? So you can lock it down as much as you want. If you want to give people a template and then just say color by numbers and they fill out the things and they can't move anything around, cool. If you want to give people the Legos and they can, move them around and change the order, awesome. But you can say, but the header is always at the top and the footer is always at the bottom, right? Which to all of us probably don't need to explain, but to other people it may. The difference between Stencil and I haven't gone into much is the level and depth of the brand guardrails is like nothing that's on the market, right? And so in Pardot or other, you can lock it down, cool. What they mean is you can make that chunk of the email like untouchable. But if it's editable, you can do anything under the sun, right? You have a full formatting toolbar that looks like Microsoft Word. With Stencil, literally every single content area, you have extreme depth. So the headline, you can say, you can't change the font size, you can't change the font color, you can't change the font weight, the font is fixed, and it has to be 22 characters or less, right? You literally can't go continue if it's more than 22 characters. But the paragraph of text, maybe you want people to make it bold or italic, but not underline, right? Like maybe you want to give them 2 font size choices, but not unlimited, right? They can choose 2 colors or 3 colors from a predefined color palette. Right, every single area you can set all those things. The links have to be required. The alt text for accessibility has to be required. Like all of those things, right, to enable you to put this in the hands of someone who otherwise doesn't know the rules and be able to sleep well at night that nothing bad is going to happen. And so, regulated industries, whether it's financial services or pharma, healthcare, we do really well in. But honestly, like lots of brands care more and more about their digital experience and people receiving these, and so it's universally applicable. I think I'll have 1 or 2 more. Very large health insurer, they were able to regain a couple hundred hours a month that had been taken up with their prior process and then use that to run A/B tests and more personalization. They used us to look at their libraries of templates and modules to figure out which ones were the best performing. Right, and then centered their efforts around those rather than just trying to keep throwing stuff against the wall. So just within the first year of implementing Stencil and being able to use that time on higher value things, they generated $32 million in incremental sales value, which is huge, meaningful in a big way. And that was 19% over anything that they'd ever done before in terms of that increase. And so they were super pleased to continue to roll out Stencil wall to wall within the org. But again, like to some folks it might take a couple hops, but like those are the kinds of results that people see when you actually focus on like solving the root problem, which is like let's fix creation efficiency, and that's going to unlock massive amounts of time to focus on the stuff that I'm sure you and the teams know you want to be doing. It's just really hard to find the time to do it. That's the end of it for me. I hope that gives you all sort of an idea of what how to get out of the time-consuming back and forth process and create amazing high-performing emails.
I got a question for you.
Bet.
Do you sell the platform in pieces? In other words, if I'm not interested in any of the collaboration components, I just need something better than Pardot offers by way of here are the templates and here's the endpoint. Go. Because I gotta tell you, you know, my sales organization struggles
Yeah.
with writing a Pardot blast. And being a research firm, we're all about words, pictures, and numbers.
Yep.
So it's really about remarketing the research that the analyst brings out each week. And I don't want to dive into the difficulty level that the analyst team does. Most of our research, believe it or not, is read through the notepad of an email as opposed to opening the PDF of the long story, because there's the encapsulation and then there's that. Bringing a richness to just the body and bringing it so that anybody in this room can write it.
You bet.
Do you sell components of this and can break it down, or is it the whole architecture you do invest in?
The platform's there. Folks don't have to use the workflow or the collaboration pieces.
You can hide
They
it,
don't want to.
segment and cut it off.
Right, exactly. And then from Stencil, I didn't say it, like we're deeply integrated via API with Marketing Cloud, with Pardot. And so from Stencil, that non-technical person, your research team can push it straight into Pardot in the right place.
But they can access the context name easily.
Right, you can
Just plug and play.
Yeah, you permission it into the right place, because a lot of organizations, we've heard, and this may be different for different folks, they, the folks like in your role or marketing ops, there's a lot of people that they have in Pardot or other platforms that they don't really want to be in Pardot. Because.
None of my guys want to be a part of it.
Right.
They just want to send the mail.
Right, exactly, and so it's
They
both
want us
that,
to drive the analytics.
that, there's a bunch of PII, and so GDPR, a whole bunch of other risks there. Generally, the platforms are not winning user experience awards, and so you click the wrong thing, you cause big problems, right? And there's a lot of folks who just like they just want to focus on the content, they don't want to do or see or any of the other stuff. And so if you were to get them out of the platform, there's nowhere to put them. And so this is a platform where those folks can live, can focus on what they do, and not be distracted or not have the risk of them in the actual marketing automation model.
I want to talk to you after the meeting.
Great, you're right. Question, so, I'd love to answer questions, whether it's about Stencil or just the problem space or solution, like, happy to chat. We spend a whole lot of time thinking about this, and I love hearing, things that people have seen or questions as you think about this for your own companies.
Yeah, and anybody who's joining virtually, please feel free to type in questions into the
Or
chat.
just talk.
It's really
Noah,
user experience.
Noah, you great presentation, and you brought back a lot of memories for me with email. My dad actually, when he started the internet back in the day, he was like one of the early adopters of mass emails, and it's amazing to see how far it's come and everything. So amazing technology.
Thank you.
You use it, Andrew?
No, I don't, but I've done similar projects with it. So like, I could probably work for your company, Noah, in my sleep with building email templates or, work with higher education,
Yeah,
establishments.
gotcha.
Yep.
So when you're using the tool, are you logged into Pardot as sort of like a plugin, or are you logging into Stencil and then kind of bringing it back into Pardot?
Live. Right, so folks, will go into your SSO or they've used any password, they're in Stencil, and from Stencil, if they have the permission, they can push into Pardot via API. Right, and so they technically never have to go into Pardot if you don't want.
Yeah, I didn't see any financial companies in your list. Have you partnered with any of the big banks?
You
or-
bet, we're almost,
Then let me
working
ask
our
you,
way through the top 10 banks in the US.
then, what about, any regulatory requirements whereby some places, like my house, you need a Series 24 to authorize the release of material of a firm. Records need to be permanently stored,
Yep.
DocuSign is big space. Have you done anything in that regard to save that final approver step so that it's memorialized and?
Yep, so we don't have any native integrations with like a Red Oak or some of those guys yet, or Red Egg or some of those guys. So
But you could mail that
you
artifact
can
out.
either mail it or download a PDF of the
Okay.
artifact and things like that. There's an audit log of everything that happens, and that is some of the reason people use the workflow that's native in Stencil to do that stuff, right? It has to go to compliance if there's not a.
There you go.
Yeah, and
Place to do
and they
that.
integrate with DAMs and the part of, and like, Stencil's not doing the actual
How long
email
do you store the
delivery.
workflow information? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry?
How long do you store the workflow events? You sign up for historical archiving, or do you say after a certain point in time, you gotta take it and own it?
Yeah, there's a data retention policy that's like the default retention policy, and then folks who have different
Scale
needs,
up.
right, can go
Okay,
from there.
cool.
So,
And do you use the private BCC functionality that Pardot has?
No,
Okay, so there's your answer, like, Pardot has regulatory compliance capabilities it's a add-on, but
yeah, but it's not forever, it's not permanent, I still have to haul it out to get it into my permanent store.
no, you can BCC your own internal,
Oh, that's
email
interesting.
for all outbound emails. Most major financial firms, that's a,
Really?
yeah. That's a must-have, that's a must-have for regulatory.
No, we take the artifact and go through a documented workflow, DocuSign workflow, and store it there forever, but maybe save some bucks.
Yeah, it's not that expensive. But again, if you're archiving the actual asset and revision, you need to have like version control and revisions, that's,
That's right.
probably an integration that could be done. What, so you talk about the extensibility of the platform, so integrates with Pardot, what are some of the other, marketing automation tools that, Stensul, because a lot of enterprise companies are working off multiple different, platforms. You saw a couple there, Adobe.
You said Teams?
Yep, exactly, sorry.
The nice thing about, like, we use Slack, but it integrates with Teams as well.
Slack? Sorry.
Yeah. You can set up the
Some SharePoint right
integrations
now.
with Slack or Teams to be like really configurable. So you may get a notification when it's ready for you to prove. You can set it up so that like every comment and review is goes to a different channel. When you can set it up so that like if you have a comment or something, you can put it into Slack and it will automatically send it to the system and it captures it where all the other comments are. So it's really flexible. Cool.
Does this answer your question, Ty?
I have a couple clients on Marketing Cloud, Eloqua and Pardot, and, the ability to sort of centrally manage creative. I mean, I'm a Pardot consultant and it's a cottage industry designing, and I can charge thousands of dollars for email templates and landing pages, and I hate to do it because there's just so much back and forth, scope creep, and like I used to work in a marketing agency, and that back and forth is the juice is not really worth the squeeze. If you have basic technical capabilities, the WYSIWYG editor, the new Pardot email builder is pretty sufficient, but once you start bringing in non-technical people, it just becomes a nightmare, and there's just the ability to centrally manage something somewhere would be a game changer.
Yeah, you brought up a couple of good things there. So one is nobody loves, like, even if you do it and people want to pay you to make the templates, or like that's not a strategic use of your time, right? And
Because I need to get involved, and somebody at the end of the day wants to make the email pop, and nobody, in the design world, that's like kind of a bad joke, because nobody really knows what that means, because design is so subjective.
Exactly, and so it's a lot of back and forth, and whether that's internal folks or external folks, it just grinds people down, and we've actually seen in the last couple of years, it's a driver of attrition, right? And in the talent market, maybe today a little bit different, but if you rewind 18 months, folks, like, I'm a talented, whatever, marketing ops person, right? I'm sitting here copying and pasting footers, right? Like, I'm done with this, like, I'm leaving, right? And we've seen a lot of leaders say, you know what, like, this actually is
Sound like the head of my steps.
Right, and so that kind of thing. You mentioned the builder, right? So, Lightning Builder is newer than the original one. The reality is, if you look at what's actually happening, it's drag and dropping is easy, right? If you want to drag and drop stuff, it's either part of the Lightning Builder, you could get that for $20 a month online,
Design
right?
email in MailChimp and just copy it in HTML.
There's a back and forth, right? There's a work. It's like all the others. That's like the drag and dropping is like the tip of the iceberg above the water, right? That the problem space is all the other stuff and all the other stakeholders involved, right? And that does not exist in any of the marketing automation platforms. Like, they don't integrate with all the other stuff. They integrate with other things, hopefully, right, that are owned by the same company. It's getting better, right? But as you were talking about earlier, but still, right? Like, it doesn't, okay, you use, AEM for assets. Cool, right? How are those getting into Lightning Builder, right? You use a brand folder, binder, right? You use, Slack's, just now they found that was Lightning.
You guys have a lot more luck with drag and drop than I do. I drag and drop, it explodes the Pardot editor, so I can do it all over.
It's a Pardot meetup. I didn't say that, you did, but, yeah.
Guys, this was helpful.
Thank
I'll
you.
be in touch. I'm actually one of those people that's caught up between the Grand Central and the Penn Station split of trains.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta get to Long Island, so thank you.
It's just downstairs, Long Island interface, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm gonna.
Thanks, Will.
We'll get there in 9 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Push the button.
Thank you.
So yeah, like this stuff should all work together, and so that's what we're focused on. How do we support the team? Not just we talk. I'm sure lots of folks are super, like, oh, I can do it in 10 minutes. It's super fast. We don't have a problem, right? Well, what about the people that send you the stuff to make it, right? And what happens when they have changes? And oh, well, yeah, it takes me 10 minutes, but then it takes them 3 days to reply to my thing, and like that's where the mess is, right? How do you get rid of that and make it a whole lot better to free up the time?
Any questions? We good?
I have one more question. It's a little bit of a leading question. Oh, Jim, yeah, please.
Can you manage multiple brands on the same platform? That you need to have separate stencil.
Yeah, you can manage multiple brands. So, and then you can also permission by that as well, depending on who should have access to the brand A versus brand B or brand C and those kind of things.
Exactly. So like, as an agency, I can work with brand A and have different set of approvers, different set of
Yes,
everything.
yes. Yep. Very, very
It's
much.
very flexible.
Yes. Sounds like it.
What stops you from sending the email out?
It stops us from sending email out, like
As a feature, I mean, why not just
It still goes through Pardot, right?
it goes through Pardot. I don't know if that's your.
No, I understand that it goes out through whatever it connects to, but
Right.
what stops that from becoming
Yeah,
emails?
that was my last startup. We built an ESP from scratch, and I never want to do that again.
Okay, all right.
That's probably the strongest answer to it. So like, we also don't touch your list. So for any of folks that like large organizations, like privacy, security, like we don't have any of that PII, which is that, right? So
Does the platform see the variable tags and?
You bet.
Okay.
You're all pre-production, you're not production or
Exactly.
post-production.
Right, inception to finished asset. That's the swim lane we're focused on.
But you don't see populated field values.
No.
So that's the
Yeah,
sort of.
we'll see this
Doesn't
focus.
see the data at all. It's
Correct.
just, hey, I know I have a
Well-
variable tag there. You can call it.
Well, we do support dynamic content
Mhm.
preview capabilities within the platform. So yes, you can see pre-populated values, right?
Wait,
No,
I won't see the name, right? I'll see the placeholder for name.
Yeah, you can see
Like,
the
hello,
field
Mike,
that
I
you're
will see
pulling
the-
on.
So for dynamic content, if you have pre-made snippets or content blocks, you can have those show up in Stencil, and we're loading the HTML from wherever it actually is, but that's for content blocks.
Right.
For personalization tokens, we don't pull in like the actual underlying value of them, but within the editor, we give you a friendly name. So that might be very different than the long cockamamie %, $, whatever thing under the hood. And actually, Stencil makes it really easy both for managing stuff going out of potentially different platforms, or if you're thinking of switching, because all of the translation of like what that underlying tag should be happens on our side, like before it gets, as it gets finished and pushed into the deployment platform. And so it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to update 1,000 emails or 1,000 templates or all this kind of stuff, right? Because content is sort of all sitting in one place, if that makes sense.
Yes. Can you do the A/B testing on Stencil, or do you create two separate emails and then push them separately?
Different ways you can do that. And so you generally it's faster in a lot of cases to just make 2 email assets. You're also going to get better analytics because you have full asset analytics and you're not trying to use the platform telling you like they received this part of this one. Like most of the platforms, all the platforms are really horrible at doing an A/B test where like part of it is different, but most of it's the same or something like that. So a lot of folks, if it's 1, 2, 3 versions, they'd rather just make 3 versions. If you have a whole bunch of versions, we support whichever way you want to do that. So if you have, what's part of handlebars or bird,
I was gonna say, no, it's all about brackets.
brackets, there you go, whatever it is, right, like we support having that under the hood, and so a non-technical person can't screw that up or get into somewhere where they shouldn't be. And then some pretty awesome stuff around creating those for a non-technical person, the segments, the things, and extracting out all the technical stuff under the hood is coming quite soon.
And this is what I remember from the product demo. I think if I want to change something in the email template, introduce a new component to my email, I work with Stencil, right? I don't create that.
So there's the end user side, which is WYSIWYG with all the rules and you use, and then there's the admin side. And on the admin side, there's what's called Studio, which is like Stencil for Stencil. That's where you can create new modules or new templates.
As the user, I can create as the admin.
Exactly, or you can create them, you set the rules, whether that's the font, like all the granular, and then you can publish them out. And then.
But you can do that.
I can do that.
Yeah,
I don't have to go through
No,
steps.
yeah, you can do that yourself, right? And because it's in one place, you get some of the benefits of you probably think of it more like a CMS where I'm gonna push this out or this update out, and I can say this is a required update, so nobody is allowed to use the old version of this module anymore, right? That has a compliance link or footer or something like that. Or this is a not required update, so I'm gonna let you know, and then at some point it becomes required. So if you start managing lots of modules and templates and stuff at scale, like these are the kinds of problems you run into. How do, I have these things living everywhere, how do I make the update, but then make sure it's actually being respected and used in all the places, and so that's all we have through the platform.
I know this is mostly for the marketing automation platforms, but we also use sales CRM.
Right.
Does it connect, can I pull the HTML and implement it into
Like native Salesforce email templates.
Right, exactly. Is there an option or?
We've, I don't think we today have a native connector or integration into those templates, but the rails that those exist on are very similar, I think, to the Pardot, some of where the Pardot templates come from, and especially with a lot of the stuff around Lightning and newer things that Salesforce is doing, like we're talking with the product team about like how they're architecting that, and then we'll be able to support that. So
Yeah, and I think that.
But you can copy and paste.
Yeah, I think HTML, you can edit Salesforce email templates via just HTML.
That's exactly, yeah.
You just don't have any of the additional guardrails that Pardot has with like locked regions and removable sections and stuff, stuff like that. So you don't have to worry about that, but I think it'll still work. They'll just disregard those particular HTML tags.
But you still abide by the mandatory stuff like you must have not subscribed.
you bet, right? You can make the footer not editable at all, right? Right. And so
I don't think you can technically send an email template through Pardot without, because there's code validation.
But this is all
there.
front work, it's gotta be
Yeah.
there before it gets
right,
out.
and so for folks in different regions of the world, the UK footer is different than the US footer and all that kind of fun stuff.
There's a reason to lock down some framework. Yeah, I'm with you.
Exactly.
So for someone like you who wants to like build it yourself and take ownership of that, that's awesome. And other groups rely on us to make those changes and all that stuff. So it all depends on
Yeah, it's flexible.
your
Either way.
ability, your desire to do that.
We got no time for part of therapy again.
Oh, come on. You guys
I had
said
one
that
more
earlier.
question, I
Yeah.
had one more question too. I'm just kind of interested in what you think about, and you mentioned it a little bit, we're obviously in a pretty volatile market. Employment's still decent, but, I was just getting into marketing and dating myself, beginning of the last downturn, and I think there's going to be more volatility. Marketers are going to be asked to do more with less. But yeah, email is going to be, people are going to want to leverage email more as a strategy. Obviously, I think you kind of echoed those sentiments or said those sentiments first. But I just kind of wonder what you think about the market, the sort of marketing operations landscape, and where that's going to go with regard to email production, and where you see your business going. with that regard, in that regard.
Yeah, I appreciate the question and certainly note that times today are really tough in a lot of places for a lot of folks. So from the first thing that comes to mind is doing more with the same amount of resources or doing more with even less resources. And
Right, because everybody just wears more hats, that's the.
right, and that's not an equation that works out really well if humans are the only thing that has to scale or that can scale in that equation. Like, that's an agency. And in that model, it's more people that are just being put towards the problem, and you're not really fixing the root problem, you're not leveraging technology pretty much at all. And so we obviously drink a lot of Stensul Kool-Aid, but truly believe technology has to be part of that solve and whatever level that is. That's one. Two, I think it's really easy in marketing ops world, especially because of all the really cool stuff, to get distracted and focus on all the really cool, shiny stuff. And at the end of the day, like, why does the marketing org exist? Why does the marketing ops org exist? It's to support and drive business outcomes. Those may be really disconnected from revenue, right? It might be awareness. It might be, traffic to the website and you don't sell anything on the website, whatever. Right? It wouldn't exist if it wasn't to impact a business outcome. And so as folks and teams think about job security, job safety, how do I make the case for, myself or additional investment into tooling or things like that, we think it's really valuable and helpful to frame it as in the context of what business goals are we driving and what things can we optimize towards or do that are going to benefit the organization. Not, we found 52 different connectors and it all flows. Like, that's great. To what end? Right? Like, that may actually be what you do, but like, to what end and how is that actually creating, we don't need to hire these 2 other people that were in the headcount plan this year, right? Even though that was going to get cut in, right? Great, you just gave us 2 heads, right? Like, we can light up 3 other territories or regions of the world that we weren't otherwise going to have budget to do. We can do a B version of every email, right? Like, even not ABC, multivariate, just a B version, right? And so if you do that by hand, you're doubling your time and cost, right? And so, great, like, how do we then show the progression of those events? Like, the way those things get dollars towards proven growth is like almost always something that people find money for, right? And so how do you put points on that scoreboard to say, okay, we do a new version, right? If we had this additional capability of technology, we could do 3 more versions, right? And if we do 10 a month and 3 more, like, if we, that's 30 more at-bats a month, or, my math's not there, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's how the case gets made. I think when folks, it's a challenge when people are in a place where they haven't had the opportunity to sort of create and touch those strategic business driving things, and so that's not going to be easy in a lot of places. But that is what I truly believe is the path, right, to more job security and increasing responsibility, right, with fewer resources. And then as the economy gets better, great, you're now in a phenomenal position to actually be invested in even more as a person, as a team, capability. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally.
Your handoff to Pardot, does that land at sending or does that land with go? I create the email, now I want to send it.
Okay.
How does that physically appear to me? I mean, do you launch it from some?
Today, no, right? So we're passing it through API into the right place into Pardot.
So I'll see it come up in Pardot as a draft, and then I just
Exactly.
gotta punch it out.
Exactly.
All right. You support Twitter? Have you thought about connecting?
Like, do I like the company or?
No. You see, I
Not as much
publish.
with Elon Musk,
No. I publish to a lot of different platforms.
Okay.
Right? So the idea that I had one tool that creates content across the different
Yep.
platforms
You
that I
bet.
need to send a message. Just
Yep,
thinking
that
out of
is
the box.
very much in line with our future vision. We started with email, we're expanding beyond email, but it's the same problem space for every channel and every content type.
Let me know how you handle VR.
In 3D.
We're just launching landing pages now. So that's.
We know in B2B, there's emails and landing pages go together as part of the same campaign, and so it's easy to have them in the same place and
That's cool.
things, and so.
That's very helpful.
Does that proof go out of the Stencil or through Pardot?
We both. You can prove out a Stencil and then you can.
I would think you
also
need to
display
prove
it.
at a stencil. You wanna be done at a stencil, right? You wanna have a polished product at a stencil.
Right, folks still oftentimes want to deploy out of the market innovation platform because some platforms surprise you and add some code or jumble.
Does it look different if I send it through Pardot? If I build it at a stencil? I
No,
don't
it
think-
won't, it won't.
Less so as part of like MailChimp or.
Oh, yeah, right, the other
kind of
guys,
different
okay.
things.
Right,
I don't care about them here.
Is there a litmus type preview option?
so in Stencil, you can see light mode, partial dark mode, desktop and mobile. And because when the modules are built, they're effectively bulletproof, there's nothing an end user can do that will break how that email renders. And so I totally understand.
I think of one way.
Sorry?
I'm just long sentences, long words.
Right, like, we'll happy to set up more time, like, they're built in a way that can accommodate that, or it's too long and it won't allow the user to do it, right? Like, those are the guardrails you can put in. And so, I totally understand how folks still want to see it in a whole bunch of ways, and some companies we work with still have a litmus or email and asset subscription. Other folks have said, you know what, we actually don't need to see it in 72 versions of Android, because when we set it up front, we did the test, and Stencil helped do the test, and then it's good, right? As
It's
long as I can see
responsive
it
out of
in-
the box.
Right, in general, the form factors in mobile and desktop and light, partial, dark, like, I'm good to go.
Yeah, so no, Microsoft Office 2014, like,
That's a great, I love that
yeah,
one.
that's like the biggest pain problem, like legacy versions of Office.
Yeah, so I was thinking actually in general, like we can pass into Office, right? So we have Office 365 integration, so create a Stencil and pass into 365 as well. If you have sales teams or other folks who like send out of Outlook.
Image optimization. Does it optimize if my team uploads an image that's 5 megabytes?
I'm pretty, so there's a pretty sophisticated image editor.
Okay.
It's not Photoshop, but it lets you crop, zoom, recenter, add overlays and stuff like that, like with guardrails.
Like adjust the DPI too.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak, let me double check.
It's what you see, what you get is what you serve, right? It's
Not
gonna up-
necessarily, you can.
Let me double check.
Yeah, but
I'm sure we won't
image
stretch
size.
an image to make it look bad.
Yeah,
but it'll probably tell you.
He is not upscale, but downscale for sure.
That's
cool.
Yeah, that's, he's talking about like if you
And
upload.
uploads 5 megabytes.
That's for print,
Down
samples, I have that.
It looks fine on the computer screen, but when you look at it on the high resolution
Oh, yeah.
file, it looks blurry.
And then 2 weeks later.
Let me check on that.
Or-
Yeah, we should set up more time, I'm happy to follow.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for 10 gigs. Oh,
Cool.
it's like 30 images. For
Thank you.
Pardot hosting, for like hosting, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
We normally have time for part of therapy, but I think we've run a bit out of time. I have one thing. Is anybody here interested in learning about, I can save it for next meeting, my experience using business units?
Yes,
I am, how bad has it gotten, Mike?
we can continue.
I punted it. It got that bad. And I'll dummy it down to this, that what was not clear to me was that if you really want to be successful using business units, you really need to have your contacts replicated for each line of business you intend. You were right. But
And you were
but because I said that I don't want to replicate, I don't want to have the same email address twice in Pardot, right? So the guy has to be, or gal has to be, there in multiple times to reflect the multiple number of business units you have. Nobody in sales is going to be able to manage that well. I mean, the end user case to support that is nuts. So yes, you absolutely can, use one email address and map it to multiple business units. But now you are talking about using a new API set. It's all a custom dev build out, frankly. And that just became a lot more expensive, not only to build, but to maintain. And I said, this is not really going to scale well. But if you have separate businesses, right, very different divisions within your organization, and want to store those contacts accordingly, right? I have some guy who does business with a paper industry, another guy does business with a space industry, but that makes sense that those channels are separate.
Geos where there's like,
Right.
a person can only live in one place.
That wasn't my case because we're a smaller firm and it's more departments than divisionally aligned. So in that regard, it really was a non-fit, but the explanation, unlike Ty's attempt to share with me, fell on, a salesperson's ears when I was originally pitching to me, which is why I punted it. I really bowed out of it from that regard because maintaining the data in Salesforce would be too confusing in terms of ownership and assignments and management. So we just said, no, we'll do something else. We'll finesse it at a Pardot, the same account and whom we're targeting. Not hard to do with segmentation lists and ownerships and things like that.
That's right, yeah, exactly, it's usually a drop-down menu, multi-pick list.
Right, things like that.
Separate the people, but I was thinking about using business units because I have that idea, I want to use it in some of them.
It's more complicated than Salesforce makes it seem. That's just-
If you want to keep,
Usually they do that, right, they always.
Oh yeah, it's
You buy
just a
it,
click of a
and then
button,
you're
it's a
stuck.
solution, yeah.
I have one more question. Who here is using B2BMA? All right, I know you're using everything, okay? You're one of these superheroes,
I'm
right?
not.
All right, maybe for another agenda, we'll try and list that.
Next time.
I'm starting to jump
Mike's
into that
personal
space
Greg's-
with two boots
Greg's
and
session.
data lenses, data sets and data lenses and dashboards is gonna be my thing for a while. So
Yeah.
I was wondering who can connect with on that.
There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with B2B. But yeah, I
That's
want
how
to
you
thank,
set it up.
Jeff and Noah
Yeah,
for
guys.
coming out. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
No, well,
on